Good morning, folks. This is Susan, and I want to talk about the book of Acts 15 and 16. See, it all started with a few days ago. I was inspired to talk about multiplication and division, and how scattering really means, God wanted us to scatter because He made one nation from one person, and the people multiplied. So when you multiply, you're adding things up several times, right? You're adding, and multiplication and addition go together. You're multiplying, but you're also scattering, right? Then how can division and multiplication, what do they have in common? When you're scattering, when you're dividing something, you're taking the one thing and you're cutting it up in little pieces, right? And you're dividing it, right? Or when you're dividing something, you're separating it to gather these. So I was like, okay, how do I explain? How can these things mean the same thing? But they don't, yet at one point it converges. They meet. It's just like the Son of God is to and from Jerusalem. He's the first and He's the last, and the last will be the first. He is to and from Jerusalem. It's like that love letter that's from God to His children, to and from. How can these things mean the same thing? They don't, but at one point they converge. They meet. It's almost like circulation, right? It's like the blood is going up into the heart, and it does its thing, and then it comes back down to deliver. And at the point of the capillaries, at capillary level, it's where you have both that's happening at that level. Oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. Giving and receiving at that point. Okay, when I was pregnant with Alexander, I lived in Mobile, and I had no family members around. All I had was my experience. I'm a female, right? I don't have to be concerned about a circumcision, right? Females are circumcised too, in the heart. In other countries, females are circumcised. In other countries, females are circumcised. Why do we circumcise boys and not girls? And why did they circumcise boys back then? Okay, so when I was pregnant with Alexander, all I remember is my mom telling me that she wished she would have circumcised my brother, Jonathan. And I just, I remember her saying that she wished she would have circumcised Jonathan because it would have been easier. But my brother's fine. my brother is just fine. He has had children and he's fine. So whether you're circumcised or not circumcised, you're going to be okay. The thing is, there's risks with circumcision. So I had never experienced any of that circumcision issues up until that point. Right? I was pregnant with Alexander. I remember when I was pregnant with Jacob, I had a discussion with Jacob's father. I was married, very young, and Jacob's father said, "My son is going to be circumcised. That's it. I'm circumcised like father, like son." So I had no choice in the matter because his father, we were married. His father was like, "We're circumcising this baby. And that's it. I was circumcised and Jacob's going to be circumcised." So that was that. That made it easy for me, but I questioned it. I was like, well, in the book, What to Expect While You're Expecting, they said that it's easier for boys to be like their fathers. So what happens when you have, a newer generation, a new generation of Jews who believe that the circumcision doesn't have to be physical, that it can be of the heart? Or what happens when you have a marriage that has Gentiles and Jews, which was in the case of the book of Acts with Timothy. But remember, Timothy was a pupil chosen by Paul. He was a pupil chosen by Paul, and so Paul didn't want to be in a predicament. It was a matter of timing. It's like, I just need you to follow along with us and learn, and I'm not going to be here fighting this right now, because he had to prioritize. When I was pregnant with Alexander, his father, being from Brazil, not circumcised, his father was fine. There was, to me, no difference between a circumcision or no circumcision. To me, there was no difference. As a female, to me, there was no difference. The only thing that I can say is that there's no need to circumcise, because for cleanliness purposes, it's like you just clean, you just clean it with water and soap, God bless America. Oh my God. Paul said, talk about it. And Jeremiah said, the weeping's been done, so just do it. And my papa's agreeing. So I'm going to talk about it. The conversion occurred right here between Peter and Paul. This is when Peter gave the okay. He was speaking publicly like, hey, it's okay for Paul to be doing what he's doing. The Gentiles, I saw this sheet coming at me. Peter saw the sheet coming at him, and he was like, I'm not doing that. But the lesson that he learned from this sheet that came to him 3 times, went back up to heaven 3 times. The sheet that had been given to him, he refused. He was like, I'm not going there. And the Father said, okay, so Peter learned that the Gentiles and the Jews are going to be one people of God. Peter learned that it's okay to accept the Gentiles, even if they're not circumcised, even if they're, not pure, because Peter was told by God that everything had been purified. So in the book of Acts in 15, it says that you're purified by the Spirit of God. You know, it's through the through faith in the Spirit. So Peter was coming out and telling people, it's okay, you know, just, I learned my lesson. The Gentiles are okay. Paul needs to do this for the Gentiles, for the church. And that was the conversion. Am I saying the right word? Like when Jews and Gentiles really need to understand that you've got Peter here and you've got Paul here together, coming out and speaking to the churches. So when I was pregnant with Alexander, his father was hardly ever there. So I really couldn't have these conversations over the phone about circumcising or not circumcising Alexander. All I remember is his father saying that he wished he would have been circumcised because he was teased as a child. He was the youngest in his family. That he was teased as a child by his older brothers about, you know, having extra skin. But in Brazil, they don't do circumcision. So I thought to myself, well, they were just teasing you because you were the baby. They were teasing you, you know, because when babies, you know, when little boys are little, they have extra skin and then they just kind of grow into it. So to me, there's a benefit to having the skin, but it's also easier to keep it clean when it's circumcised. So to me, I just feel like it's risky. It's a risky surgery for babies, and this is why Jews do it on the 8th day and not soon after they're born, like they do here in the West. And here, like in the hospital where I birthed Alexander, it was a Catholic hospital. It wasn't a Jewish hospital. But when I gave birth to Alexander, the nurses were like, the nurse that came, I was kind of medicated from the surgery, and she was like pushy. And I was told that the doctor, they didn't specify who. They said the doctor's ready for the circumcision. If you're going to do it, you have to do it. I'm going to come back in the morning. This was at night. She was like working 12-hour shifts from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. She said, I'm going to give you time to think about it. I'm going to come back in the morning. But it was nighttime. I was medicated from having had a C-section. The baby had just been born. And so Darciso had come from being, you know, driving hours from another state, and he was like so super tired, you know, and the nurse could see that, you know, that, you know, I was speaking in Portuguese to him, you know, the nurse could see, but she was kind of pushy, and so she said, I'm going to come back in the morning. But that's the way the nurse was trained, to be probably not give people time to think about it too much. But I wondered why the doctor didn't come and talk to me personally. See, I assumed when she said the doctor that it was going to be the baby's doctor. But I said, well, can I talk to the doctor? And the nurse said, no, the doctor's really busy right now, and, you know, you're going to have to sign the papers by in the morning. So I was like, Darciso, what to do? And Darciso was like, well, I wish I would have had a circumcision when I was a baby because, you know, I got teased by my brothers and blah, blah, blah. You know, and I was just like, well, I thought he was like father, like son, you know, and, or like son, like father, or whatever. And he said, well, you know, I don't know. It's like she was pushing it. So he said, well, you know, we've got to do it.
And I felt like the whole thing was just rushed. And when I after I birthed Alexander and brought him home, I actually looked through the paperwork from the hospital, and it was noted that the doctors, my OB's nurse, she noted that she had discussed circumcision with me, or the doctor had discussed circumcision with me. And I was like, at any point did we discuss circumcision? Because I did not know that it was going to be my OB that was going to do the circumcision, because she is a surgeon. She did my C-section. And when I, talked to her about not doing a C-section, I did not want to have Alexander via C-section. She said, well, you have to have a C-section because your previous baby was a C-section. And I said, well, Jacob was born 11 years ago, and they did a circumcision. I mean, they did a C-section because I my cervix did not dilate, and the water had broken, and the baby was experiencing stress, so they had to get him out. It was like an emergency C-section. And he was born 25 hours after my water broke. And it was like the whole thing was like really dangerous for him to remain there. My cervix just failed to dilate to 10 centimeters. So I said it was a different situation, and she said, no, well, we'll schedule a C-section a week before your due date. And Alexander was due on Jacob's birthday. But she said, well, schedule it a week so that you don't go into labor. And I was like, well, what if we just let me go into labor naturally and see what happens? She said, no, I don't like to do it that way. I like to plan ahead. And she said, if you don't want to do it this way, then I'm not going to be able to be your doctor. And this was the doctor that was chosen when I went through. See, I was new to Mobile, and I couldn't find work. And his dad was there because, okay, I'm going to go back. I was pregnant with Alexander 3 months. I was living in Mississippi. Alexander's uncle woke me up one morning and said, I need you to come and translate. And I got up, got dressed. It was like 7 o'clock in the morning when I got a phone call to get up and get dressed and go translate. And I got up and went to translate, and I had no idea that we were going to be driving from Mississippi to Mobile. It was like 45-minute drive. And I was there with Alexander's father and Alexander's uncle. They wanted me to translate at a flooring company. And the translation was that the company could hire people who had a tax ID, and the people who had a tax ID could subcontract other people who didn't have a tax ID, but that the company, was not going to be interfering in that. So they hire people who have a tax ID, and that's that. Whomever they want to subcontract is fine. So that's Alexander's father was working for somebody who had a tax ID. And I told Alexander's dad, I said, why don't we get married? Why don't you get your tax ID and then eventually get your legal right to work here so you can bring your daughter from Brazil, since that's what I was being told by Darciso's family in Mississippi, his brother and his sister-in-law. So I translated, and I thought to myself, well, how do these guys do business? I mean, they must speak English well enough. I wondered why they needed me to translate. So I was like, well, I can get jobs anywhere here in Mobile, working as whatever, doing whatever, since I speak 2.5 languages, because my Brazilian was not perfect, but it was enough to get by. And so we went to Mobile because that's where Alexander's father was working, even though his brother stayed in Mississippi. But as soon as we moved to Mobile, his father, Alexander's father, didn't have any work. So he had to go to another state to work for me to be able to live in that apartment. I was told by somebody who took over the office work, because our manager's assistant at the office at the apartment complex, our manager assistant had gotten really sick with cancer, and we prayed and we prayed and we prayed. I was part of a praying group in Mobile through the Baptist church. Even though I'm not a Baptist, we were just praying, with a praying group. And she recovered. But I was told by the lady who took over her duties not to trust anyone. She said, don't trust anyone around here. And she did say Hispanics, but she didn't mean it in a racist way. She just knew that there was a lot of stuff going on. And I was focused on reading while I was pregnant with Alexander. I saw a vision of this tree, and the acronym SAGE was revealed to me. Savior, Allah, God, Elohim. Savior, Abba, God, Emmanuel. Savior, Allah, God, energy. And so I was continuing with my reading, and people were coming up to me, asking me, just telling me about their situation with their legal status or illegal status. And I just, all I could do, because I'm not an attorney, all I could do with my language skills was write a humble letter to the governor, because something was happening in Mobile where all of these illegal immigrants were being targeted and were being deported. So I wrote a letter to the governor, and I was just like, these people are already here. They're already helping with the economy. If they were to all leave, it would hurt our economy. And I said, yes, we would recover, but we need a balance. We cannot be letting everybody and their brother in here, but the people that are already here are here. And they've been paying rent, they've been going out to eat, buying groceries, paying electricity, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember quite how I worded it, but I can go back through my emails and share with you, because I am not like anti-immigrants, but I am also understanding that when we let everybody and their brother in here, you have the native people, the people that have lived in these towns who are living in poverty. It's like they're being, when you have so much in your budget, and I'm not a public speaker, okay, so this is very rough draft. I'm going to have to go back and listen to myself and type up what I'm saying to kind of make it to the point, because I know I'm speaking a lot. But all of these things were happening simultaneously in Mobile. When you've got an imbalance with everybody and their brother coming in, yes, it does help the economy, but then it takes away from the locals. And then there's also the mentality, like, well, the reason why America likes us is because we work hard. Those negros, they don't want to work. They just want to live off the government. I'm not saying that all people think that way, but a lot of them were coming to me through the years. If we're going to say statistically, the majority of the Latin Americans that were having these conversations with me, that was their point of view, that the reason why America wants people like them is because they come in here, they work hard, they don't live off the government because they're illegal or they want to get their papers. And the whole thing was, making me uncomfortable, because I'm just thinking, I don't hear this demeaning, derogative comments from Black Afro-Americans toward Latinos. I don't hear Black people saying, well, those Hispanics, they just come in here and they take from us. I don't hear that. So I didn't notice that Black Afro-Americans were living in wealth because of what they're smooching off the government. What I saw was that the majority of people living, the vast majority, the majority of people living in poverty were Black Afro-Americans. When I would drive through Mobile and I would see these bus stops naked with no benches and no covers, and people having to wait for the bus in the rain or in the hot sun or sitting on the lawn, and oftentimes the people sitting had a cane or were elderly. I'm not saying that all people who were waiting for the bus were Black, but the majority were Black Afro-Americans, and they were obviously poor. But these are also the people who are supporting public transportation. And I thought to myself, well, if these people are supporting the public transportation, because without these customers, the bus drivers and that whole industry would cease to exist. So why can't our towns, our cities, support those who are supporting them by benching and covering the bus stops? That's the least that you can do. It's like if you go to a restaurant, right? You're going to a restaurant and you're paying for food, and you're tipping after the service, not before, right? So it's like the server brings you your drink. The server's only making $3 an hour. And the server's bringing your drink and your refills and your food hot. And if it's not hot enough, or if it's not to your liking, if it's not rare or not cooked enough, you're going to tell the server. The server is the middleman, right? Otherwise, you would go to fast food drive-through, right? But if you want to be served, then sometimes people don't leave a tip, okay? Or sometimes they leave a tip. But I forgive, because I know that there are people who don't leave a tip because they cannot afford it. So I'm not worried about that. I've seen families that go out to eat, and you can just tell that they're just wanting to take their kids out you know. And is that why you're not going to provide them with good service? No, you provide them with just as much, if not better, because you know that they don't get to do this very often. And this is a treat for them to go out to eat. So, oh my God, bless America. So, how does this have to do anything with circumcision? Okay. I ended up waiting tables because I couldn't find a job. I wanted to have my own restaurant because when I was a vegetarian, I couldn't find I couldn't find any vegetarian food here in the South. So I thought, I want to have my own restaurant because it's hard to find a restaurant with a smoke outside. And I was told, well, you need to go to California to open up that kind of a restaurant. I said, well, everybody in California is already doing that. They have vegetarian, smoke-free environment, And so I was told, well, they're not going to like it here in the South. And you're going to have to contact your representative if you want to have the smoke outside. That's when I started contacting representatives about anything because I was told to do that that's the way to get past the law. So I was like, I'm not a politician, but I will contact a politician to please consider doing something because people are, people want it. People need smoke-free environment. Yeah. The employees need a smoke-free environment because those servers, they don't even make but $3 an hour nowadays, sometimes even less. And then, if they're overwhelmed because they have more tables, somebody's food is going to be cold. Somebody is not going to get a refill. And then the more tables you have, the more mediocre the service. Not everybody can handle the same amount of tables. Some people can handle more tables than others because they have more experience or because that's their God-given gift. But that doesn't mean that other person that cannot handle that many tables is dumb. That doesn't mean that they're slow, that they're bad servers. That just means that maybe that's not their forte. So maybe they need less tables. But you have to consider if that's what they're doing for a living, then that. Okay. So this is why I believe that God put me here on earth. Like a converging. Like we're meeting in the middle. So Paul and Peter, the book of Acts 15. Peter told everyone what Paul is doing. Listen, he's here for the Gentiles. God himself told me to accept the Gentiles. The reason why he doesn't believe in circumcision is because the circumcision is going to be through the purification of the heart, through faith in the Spirit. That was Peter's okay for Paul. Okay? Remember that God said in the Bible that Son of Man to Ezekiel, on one stick write to Judah and all the Israelites associated with Judah, and on another stick write to Joseph and all the Israelites associated with Joseph, and then I'm going to join the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, to the stick of Judah, and it's going to be one stick, as in one branch. Yeshua. Serving God and one another.
See, remember that Paul was human. Paul made mistakes, just like we all do. And Paul was just trying to do the best he could, considering he had so much time. He was wanting to just get it done, get it done, get it done, because he knew that time was of the essence. He did not come here to fiddle fart around. Well, depends on how you look at that. But he was here on a mission. You know, Paul could speak never ending. It was like a river of words. Just never ending. There's not enough time in our lifetimes There's not enough time in our lifetimes. So when Paul circumcised Timothy was because Timothy was chosen. Timothy was chosen to be Paul's pupil, his student. So there was no time to be arguing and battling that battle. It just was not worth the time. So Paul chose to just do it. Just like when I circumcised Alexander. I circumcised him because I was under pressure. And it's done, and Alexander's fine. I regretted it at the time, but it is done and it's fine. By the grace of God, but there are consequences to doing a circumcision right after birth. What happens is sometimes the skin, depends on what kind of circumcision. Sometimes they can take out too much skin, and then it tears the baby when they have a little erection when they go to pee. It hurts the baby because it tears. Sometimes they leave too much skin, so they may as well not have done the circumcision because now it looks different. I believe if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But when Alexander had a circumcision, I was giving him these bed baths, and this neighbor was wanting to come in and bathe the baby and, and all of that. And I was like, look, I've done this before. I'm the mother of Jacob. I don't. She was like, oh no, let's bathe this baby. Let's bathe this baby. So she submerged Alexander in this water. And the next day, Alexander had like scabbed up, weird looking, because I knew that I wasn't supposed to bathe them until the belly button fell off, the little shriveled up belly button. And that's when it was time to be okay to bathe them. But in the meantime, I was putting the ointment on him and everything. But I did not like doing a circumcision on Alexander. But it was like his father was like, well, okay, just do it because I wish I would have had it done so I wouldn't have been teased as a child. And the nurse was in there putting the pressure. And then when I asked to speak to the doctor, the nurse said, well, the doctor's really busy right now. I'm going to come back in the morning. I was half drugged up, from having had a C-section. And then when I took Alexander back to the doctor said, well, I don't do circumcisions. The pediatrician said that. I don't do circumcisions. You need to go back to the surgeon who did the circumcision. So when I took him back to the lady who did my C-section, the doctor who did my C-section, she said, well, you need to take him back to the pediatrician because I don't know anything about babies. And I said, well, can you explain to me how the circumcision was done? Because we didn't discuss circumcision when I was pregnant the whole time I was coming to see you. And she was like, well, I thought my nurse had discussed it with you. I said, no. The nurse asked me if I was going to do a circumcision, and because his dad wasn't around, I said, I don't know yet. Nobody discussed circumcision with me. It was like pressured last minute. So I had a cow. I had to go to Texas to get a second opinion from another doctor who told me when you bathe him, pull down the skin so very gently, because the pediatrician, before I went to Texas, the pediatrician who saw him and said, well, I don't know anything about circumcisions because I'm not a surgeon, he pulled down on Alexander's skin really hard and said because Alexander was getting an adhesion and Alexander bled a little bit, and he cried, and then it got swollen up. And so I saw another pediatrician within the same clinic after this doctor refused to see Alexander because I really think that doctor was afraid I could sue him. So one day I was notified, well, the doctor doesn't want to be Alexander's doctor anymore because I had a cow. And I told my neighbor, see, my neighbor where I used to pray with her, I met her through the Baptist church, which was on Sage Avenue. She's the one who referred me to the women's resources. The women's resources was right around the corner from my house. That's where I went to get an ultrasound when I was pregnant with Alexander because I was not working. I could not find work, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't find work because the whole thing that took me to Mobile was this translating job. So I went to the different agencies, job agencies, looking for work. At one point, I was told, I was given a hard time by this particular woman. She was like, well, I need your resume to be on one page. And I said, I've always had 2-page resume and no one's ever said anything about it. I actually took a technical writing class in college, and this is my final test and I aced it. And she's like, well, this is dated. And I was like, how can I fit everything on one page? I said, if I fit everything on one page, it's going to be a smaller font. And it's not professional to have a font that's smaller than 10, than 10. And she said, well, it needs to be on one page. You need to, figure out, but it's more professional. So I went home and I went ahead and put everything on one page, and it looked really tiny, right? And I was like, this is not professional. But anyway, I was given a hard time. Then I was told by some person from the Ladies' Tea, the International Ladies' Tea, she said to me, don't worry about what job, just know that God will provide. And I was thinking, I can't live in poverty like this. I have got to be able to provide for my son. So some of these very ladies were the ones saying, well, how are you going to provide for Alexander when Alexander was taken by DHR? So I went to Texas for 4 months from 2010. Alexander was born September 2009, and I went to Texas in early 2010, and we stayed there for a few months. And I actually lived with Darcisa and his roommate in Texas. And the reason why I went there is because I was hardly ever with Darcisa. When I was pregnant with Alexander and I needed money to buy the baby stuff, Darcisa said, well, don't worry about a crib. We don't need a crib. I can just put him in a little drawer and we can just line it up. And I said, excuse me, we need a crib. So by the grace of God, we had a neighbor, her daughter, Susie, she actually gave me the little playpan. But This whole thing that y'all are doing in Mobile is of the devil. I am not sacrificing my son Alexander to a bunch of people who don't even know God. You talk about God and you don't know God. You talk about God like you know God, and you have not seen my Father's eyes, nor have seen his mouth, nor have you seen what I've seen. It's easy for you to crucify somebody else because it's not your child. I am not your biblical whore. I am my Father's daughter. And I will not be exploited anymore by these so-called Christians preaching at the churches and gathering, and your little ladies gathering. I was being laughed at when Alexander was taken by DHR. You are my witness of that. It is not funny. It is not funny to be sacrificing children. Sacrifice yourself. Meet me at the cross of Christ if you want to consider yourself part of the body. Do you know what church means? It's sacrifice. Meeting in the middle. God's temple was not built by human hands. I believe that the people who are already here, legal or illegal, and I've said it through the years, I've said it through the years, let them be, because according to my friend who works with the apartment complex, he said, any green is green. We don't discriminate. But let us make sure that our green is clean. I forgive. I can live through being ripped off my clothes, being stripped naked. We were born naked and we'll leave naked because this body is just a temporary vessel. But do not continue to do this to our children, robbing them of their inheritance with your perversion. So, Peter did not want to eat the sheet. I've had to eat. And I will do it to the end.
Let this be the last time any of you hypocrites talk about God and the Holy Spirit in vain. That any of you hypocrites go out there perverting the children, robbing them of their inheritance. Because you're giving them the little crumbs while you enrich yourself with what is theirs to inherit. God is a God of freedom, not oppression. God is a God of justice and truth and light. Do not mock one another when your brother or your sister is suffering, because their suffering is real. Comfort them. Support them as a true Christian, as a true faithful person that you are. Whatever your religion may be, because faith is not religion and religion is not faith. Just because they're not Christian enough, I am not speaking to the Jews. I am speaking to the Christians. For salvation is from the Jews. You have been chosen by God's mercy and grace to join the stick of Judah. So you must recognize that your Christianity means nothing to God if it ain't through faith. And this is a message for the Bible Belt. So many churches and so much wealth among you, yet so much poverty, so much homelessness, so much drug addiction, because people are lost because you have failed them. But God is a God of mercy, and God wants to use you. He wants to use you to go out there and genuinely teach the people about God and bring them to God. He wants to use you with your God-given gift to do it right this time. He is a most merciful God. And you who preach and you who pray, continue to do so, but this time with faith burning in your hearts. And go out there and spread the word with truth. Let us see in our communities, God. Let us see God. God is love. And love is seen through. I don't want you to talk about God and not do. All of these bus stops, naked. How is this supporting those who support that industry? Let us give to those who give. How are we going to be educating our children in the schools, our public schools? How are we going to be teaching them anything good when we're depriving them? Because only the elite Only those who are gifted. Because you're not gifted. That's why you're not in a gifted school. That's what you're teaching the children. That's not what you're saying, but that's what you're doing. You're not gifted enough. You don't live in the right zip code. Your parents aren't paying us, the administrators, for you to be privileged enough. That's the message we're sending the children, even though we're not saying it. How is our hard-earned money being spent? If you teach the children that they're not worthy of a better education, that they're not worthy of foreign languages in elementary, that they're not worthy of the things that the children who are gifted and wealthy are worthy of, where do you think they're going to end up in the future? Aren't they the future leaders of America? Don't they have a leader inside of them called Yeshua? They do. Each and every one of those children, born or yet to be born, in your wombs, they are worthy. For God has chosen them. We need to teach with our hearts, because they will be taking care of you in the future. The decisions that we make today will affect humanity up to 1,000 years from today. One day with God is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years with God is like a day with God. The decisions you make today will affect humanity 1,000 years from today. All children deserve, whether their parents are educated or not, whether their parents are wealthy or not, whether their parents are white or not, whether their parents are, I don't care who their parents are. It doesn't matter. For we are all children of one true God, and He has mercy on you and you. Just because those of you who cannot afford a car and have no choice to ride a bus, you don't deserve to be out there in the sun and in the rain and in the cold. How are we using our money? Is our green clean? But God is a God of mercy. And we have water and soap to clean it up. How are we going to be teaching our children that washing our hands is important when we don't wash our own? Let us clean together, with God's helping hand above ours. Every day we have to make that choice. Every day. Just because you were born again 2 decades ago don't mean anything if you're not choosing it every day. So Alexander was circumcised. And I regretted it back then, but I don't regret it now. It's done and it's okay. By the grace of God, he is fine. And he's circumcised because he was meant to be circumcised, because God allowed it. And I'm fine and he's fine by the grace of God. But if we're going to be doing circumcisions, us, the Jews and the Gentiles, we need to be talking about the benefits of circumcision and when to do the circumcision, because there's a right patient for the right surgery at the right time through the right route. And I mean the right route because there's only one route. For the right reasons. Does it really prevent infection? Does it really prevent disease? Or is that what they're selling you? Because the insurance company will pay for it. And if we need to do a circumcision on a child based on your religion or your desire, is that your choice? Are you giving your child a choice? Does the baby have a choice? Yes. And if we are going to do our circumcision anyway because it's in their best interest, let us talk about it amongst us, Jews and Gentiles. Why did the Jews do it on the 8th day? There's a reason for this. It gives time for the baby to recover from birth, to get their own little immune system going, to give them enough time to nurse so that he can heal. Not on the 2nd day, because here in America, doctors want to do it before the parent is released from the hospital. It's not because of what's best for the baby. It's what's best for them, for insurance coverage. So Paul circumcised Timothy because time was of the essence, and he was not going to fight that battle. That was not the priority. So he did it and move on. He wasn't contradicting himself. He just had his priorities straight. Paul and Peter, Acts 15. Thank you.